This guy turned a neglected factory into a $2 billion foodie powerhouse, and it all started with a piece of junk mail. It's true. Hamdi Ulukaya is the founder of Chobani. This is the yogurt brand bringing Greek style to the dairy aisle. Y'all know it. It's tasty, it's creamy, it's delicious. This business is so good, it's got me salivating. I'm going to tell you all about it and the amazing story behind Chobani. That's coming up in just a sec. If you're new here, my name's Jon Davids. I've helped my clients make over $200 million working with my marketing agencies. You can learn more at jondavids.com. While you're there, get on the newsletter. I send out a weekly email. You're going to love it. And of course, follow me across social. And a special announcement today. I'm talking about my first book, Marketing Superpowers. If you are listening to this, it might be out, it might be on pre-order. Make sure you get your copy of Marketing Superpowers wherever you buy books. And now, let's get to the show. So let's start at the beginning. The year is 2005. Hamdi is busy building a cheese business. He's in the feta business, living in New York State, and things are going okay, but things are not great. That's when Hamdi spots a flyer in the mail. There's a yogurt plant for sale, and it's close by. It's about 100 years old. This is an old plant, and it's being sold off by Kraft, the big food and dairy company. And the price tag is $1 million. Now, Hamdi loves his yogurt and he would love to get in on this deal, and he knows his way around dairy, but there's a problem. He doesn't have $1 million. This feta cheese company he's building is doing okay, but he's struggling. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, like a lot of startup business owners, like a lot of immigrants who come to the United States looking for the American dream, he hasn't quite hit on a winning formula in feta. Maybe he can do it in yogurt. He just needs to find a milli. Now, it turns out the government loves to lend money to entrepreneurs just like Hamdi. This is called the SBA loan program, the Small Business Association loan program. And if you know how to work it, and if you're patient, and if you don't mind borrowing money from the US government, you can actually get a lot of money. So they chip in $900,000 of the $1 million purchase price. For the other $100,000, Hamdi scrounges up cash from friends and family. Maybe he tossed in a few bucks of his own, but basically, for almost no money down of his own, he gets ownership of this 100-year-old dairy plant, and he buys it. He buys it for about $1 million. The final sale price was never made public, but it was listed for $1 million. I'd imagine it sold for about that. Kraft takes the cash. They toss Hamdi the keys, and now he needs to make some yogurt. So Hamdi starts formulating his recipe. It's going to be a Greek-style yogurt, and it's the kind that he grew up eating in Turkey. He wants to focus on flavors. He wants to focus on texture. He actually hires somebody who's been an expert in the yogurt business. They spend about 2 years formulating this formula. And in the meantime, he kept on a few of the staff members from the dairy plant because he didn't actually know how to run this plant. It's 100 years old. So he kept on some of the Kraft employees and kept them busy refurbishing the machines and doing whatever prep work they could. It's funny, he actually borrowed a little more than the purchase price from the government, and that gave him runway to run for about 2 years while he was doing all this. So he not only had cash to buy the plant, but he had cash to actually run his business with no revenue for about 2 years. Very smart, by the way. Anybody who is at the early stages of their business and they think about what the startup costs are, a lot of the time they think about the startup costs just in terms of the CapEx. What's the capital expenditure that I'm going to need to start this business? Maybe I need to buy a building or lease equipment, or maybe I need to develop a website or develop an app. And they just put in the costs of doing that thing, the capital expenditures. You also have to think about your runway for 2 months, 6 months, a year. In Hamdi's case, 2 years, because he was building a CPG product. He needed to go ahead and get that right from the beginning. So after 2 grueling years in the kitchen, the stuff is tasting good. It's thick, it's creamy, it's just a little tangy. It's perfect. He calls it Chobani. And now he needs to break into the yogurt aisle. So he makes some key strategic decisions early on. Now listen up here. He decides that Chobani will be mid-priced in between the American and the European brands. So the American yogurt's a little less expensive. The European yogurt, the imported stuff, is a little more expensive. He could price there, but he wants it to be accessible. He wants people to think about it like an everyday food, not some luxury that you buy once or twice a year. So he prices it above the American yogurt and below the European yogurt. He also insists that it be stocked with the other yogurts and not in the gourmet section. So when he first went into independent retail, there were independent grocery stores that picked him up before any of the majors did, they wanted to put him with the other luxury foods, the organic foods, the premium foods, the gourmet foods. And he said, no, I don't want people thinking about this like it's out of their reach. I want them to consider it when they're considering any other yogurt purchase. And the third thing he did, which was really interesting, is he decided to go for a wider cup, signaling that the stuff inside is different. And this is a subtle thing, but so important when it comes to packaging and design and colors. There are subtle signals and cues that you can send to the consumer just by making your packaging a little different. This is true for a physical product or a digital product. That's why web design and app design are so important, because with the fonts and the colors, and in this case, just having that wider opening such that when you dip your spoon in, you just feel like, it's a little different. This doesn't feel like the yogurt I eat every day. It signals the stuff inside is different. So in 2007, the yogurt lands in a Long Island grocery store and it sells out fast, almost immediately. Hamdi is hustling to keep the shelves stocked, but it's not easy. Customers are scooping up his yogurts, and indie grocers are banging on his door. So he starts with one Long Island grocer, and then boom, it is growing. Now keep in mind here, in New York, in Long Island, at this part of the country, there are very influential buyers. So probably, if I had to guess, they're probably higher income, they're probably influential, they're probably tastemakers, maybe they're members of the media, maybe they're members of elite groups or what have you. So the location of where you launch matters a lot. I've talked about this before on the podcast. When we're targeting moms at Influicity, Utah moms, very important segment to be a part of. When you're targeting foodies, you want to be in Vegas. You want to be in New York City. There's probably 4 or 5 blocks in New York City where all the most influential foodies dine. So you want to be a part of those communities. So understanding the customer you're targeting and understanding what communities influence that customer, really, really important. So now he's got lots of independent grocers banging on his door. And then what happens? Well, then ShopRite comes calling. Then Kroger comes calling. Then Whole Foods comes calling. Fast forward, so we started in 2007. Now in 2010, sales hit $100 million, and they are climbing fast. Chobani is a hit. And as you fast forward through the story, that's 2010, 2015, 2020. This is a multi-billion-dollar company now in terms of revenue, and it's still owned by the same founder, by Hamdi. He never went public. He never sold the company. He never took on major investors. The only thing more delicious than the yogurt is the marketing here. Now, I already told you about the packaging, the pricing, some of the placement stuff, all genius moves. But there's actually more to it. Hamdi and his crew didn't spend any serious money on paid ads until sales were well past $1 billion. They ran a Super Bowl ad, I think it was in 2014 or so, and a Super Bowl ad, fine, that cost $3 million. But he was already north of $1 billion in sales at that point. How did he build this business so good, so fast? Well, he leaned hard on a customer community. Chobani was very early with social media. Back in 2011, they joined Instagram. That's just a few months after the app was launched. And to be investing your time and energy into a new app probably tells me they were investing their time and energy into a lot of different apps, into a lot of different avenues and vehicles where they thought they could reach their target customer. So they probably tried 50 things that didn't work, but they were on time and early to Instagram, and that did work. And that was game-changing for them, all that free and earned media in the early days. They pushed really hard on Facebook, engaging with local shoppers, gaining over 1 million followers on their Facebook account. They leaned into bloggers and influencers long before it was cool cool, squeezing into the feeds. And they created a myth and a magic around the brand with strong stories. People could feel this yogurt was different. Hamdi built his tribe in real life and online, dominating the yogurt aisle, one creamy cup at a time. And there's a few things I want to dig into more, and these things are top of mind for me because I talk about them in Marketing Superpowers. The first thing I want to talk about is the origin story. So the origin story is something that people don't understand. They don't realize how powerful it can be for any brand, big or small. People these days, and this is true even throughout history, but people these days especially really want to connect with whoever they are buying from. And so the story you tell is so important. I go into the originate formula, which is the 8-step formula I use to develop an origin story. But just to give you a really high level now, think about it like this. If I said to you that I grew up eating delicious pasta and the pasta sauce was homemade, and every Sunday we'd go to my grandmother's house, and she grew up in Italy, and she had the recipe from her mother and from her mother generations ago. And every Sunday we'd go, and I can remember the music, and I can remember the sounds and the smells, and my family would sit down and we would dine on this delicious homemade pasta recipe. And now I'm launching my own pasta brand using that same family recipe from years ago. It's delicious. I want to share my family recipe with you, and I want to offer you a delicious bowl of spaghetti. Now, doesn't that sound better than I sell spaghetti sauce? Give it a try. The origin story creates magic. It creates myth. It turns something ordinary into something extraordinary. So if you are building a brand and you want that brand to mean something, you have to have a powerful origin story. And Hamdi has that. He grew up eating this yogurt. Watch videos of him talking about the delicious pomegranates, the milk, the cheese he grew up with, the fruit, the vegetables. He really brings passion to the category, and it makes this yogurt different. It truly does. I want to dig into the placement and the packaging a little more as well. You know, we live in this on-demand world where anything you want is at your fingertips immediately. But you also have to think about creating friction, because friction does create desire, right? And the most simple example of this is go to a nightclub, and what do you see at the nightclub that attracts you to that nightclub? You see a lineup outside the door, and you've got to stand in line to get into the nightclub. And what do? You stand in line. What restaurant do you want to go to? You want to go to the restaurant that it's hard to get a reservation at, because if it's hard to get a reservation at the restaurant, chances are it's a good restaurant. So you fight and you work and you call in a favor to get a reservation and get a table at that restaurant. Friction is good for creating demand. Now, what does that mean here? Well, it means creating something that people have to work for a little bit, that people have to go to the right aisle, that people have to look for and talk to their friends about, and maybe they want to hunt for it. Hey, where's this available? It's available at this independent grocer. That's stuff in the early days that you can play into. Distribution is something everybody wants to be available everywhere, and that's cool. That's good if you're scaling, but if you're early on, you kind of want to be a little bit under the radar. You want to be a secret. You want people to have to work to figure things out. So in the early days, creating friction, and even frankly, if you want to be elevated and a little bit exclusive, creating friction is really, really important in your brand. And the last thing I want to talk about is this in-person and local element. So in the early days, one thing Chobani did was they tapped into local Facebook groups. They did pop-ups in stores. They did sampling. And people don't like this stuff, especially internet people that I hang out with, because they think, well, this doesn't scale. Well, you have to remember, it doesn't scale globally, but you don't need it to scale globally. You need the emotion of it to scale, especially when you're building something early on. Like, I don't need my first marketing strategy to work on day 3070. I need it to work on day 1, and maybe I need it to work on day 5 and day 10. But by day 30, by day 50, by day 100, I'm going to be moving on anyways. So do things early on that don't necessarily scale, and in-person's a big part of that. So especially if you have something that needs to be touched or tasted or felt, don't worry about doing a local event and say to yourself, oh, well, I shouldn't bother doing this because it's not going to work as I scale. Who cares? As you scale, you'll have new problems and new solutions. On day 1, think local, think real, think touching, feeling, seeing your customer close up. And as you grow, you will figure out new ways to do that. I love the Chobani story. Most of all, beyond anything, I absolutely love bootstrapped entrepreneurs. You guys know I love bootstrapped entrepreneurs. Those are my people. And Hamdi is my people for sure. $1 billion, I think it's $2 billion in revenue now that Chobani has. Unbelievable. If you guys haven't tried this yogurt, you got to do it. Let me know what you guys think of Chobani. Let me know in the comments on YouTube. Leave a rating, leave a review on Apple, Spotify, and of course, get on my email list at jondavids.com. I'll talk to you guys next time.